Long time ago, in the ancient kingdom of Cajola, two princes were born to the ruling family. Prince Deji, the elder, was known for his kindness and wisdom, beloved by the people. His younger brother, Prince Ajani, was cunning, ambitious, and harboring dark secrets. Behind his mask of charm, Ajani was a man with violent desires. Even though he seemed calm and reserved, many did not know how dangerous he could be. For years, he roamed the village at night, preying on women, leaving terror in his wake. Many of his victims vanished. He would end their lives and hide the bodies to avoid questions. The victims' families were left to grieve without answers. Yet, none knew that their prince hid such monstrous deeds. After the death of their father, the mantle of kingship was to pass to the eldest son, Deji. As the firstborn, he was the rightful heir, beloved by the people for his wisdom, kindness, and steady nature. Both princes had established families of their own before the death of their father. Deji had been raised with a deep understanding of their kingdom's traditions and values, groomed from a young age to rule with fairness and compassion. The people of Cajola felt reassured by his calm presence, believing he would bring peace and prosperity to the land. Ajani, Deji's younger brother, had always resented living in Deji's shadow. He felt overlooked, believing he possessed the qualities and ambition necessary to lead, if only others would see him as the rightful king. Deji's kind-heartedness and humility, which the villagers admired, seemed to Ajani to be signs of weakness. Over time, his jealousy twisted into something dark and dangerous, a desire not just for power but for revenge against a brother he felt had stolen his destiny. On the eve of Deji's coronation, Ajani could no longer bear his envy. Driven by his ambition, he secretly sought the guidance of a powerful sorcerer, Ojiji, a practitioner of forbidden magic, to aid him in claiming the throne. Together, they plotted to end Deji's life on the eve of his coronation. Ajani slipped into Deji's chambers that night, casting a spell to seal his fate. By dawn, Deji was found dead, his face peaceful, as though he had simply drifted away. The kingdom mourned deeply, but there was no time to question his sudden death. The elders, believing it was the will of the gods, turned to Ajani. And so, Ajani became king, crowned with the crown that should have been his brother's. 6 years later. 6 years into his reign as king, Ajani's demeanor grew colder and more volatile. Power, which he had craved for so long, began to consume him. He became quick to anger, harsh in judgment, and unrecognizable to those who had once loved him. His wife, Queen Yemi, was the first to witness this dark transformation. She had married him in the hope that he would be a wise and fair leader, someone who would honor their people and protect their family. But instead, he grew more controlling and violent. The warmth that had once bound them began to fade. In private, Ajani's cruelty became even more pronounced. His frustrations, fueled by guilt and hidden sins, often turned to violent outbursts, and Yemi found herself the target of his growing rage. She pleaded with him, trying to reason, reminding him of the values he once held. But each attempt to reach him only deepened his anger, and he pushed her further away, unwilling to admit his faults. Finally, unable to bear the abuse any longer, Queen Yemi made a painful decision. She chose to leave the palace, seeking a life away from the torment that Ajani's rule had brought upon her. Her only solace was her daughter, Princess Bisola, an innocent soul who had remained untouched by her father's darkness. Yemi wished to take Bisola with her, hoping to shield her from the cruelty of her father. But Ajani, seeing Bisola as his only happiness, refused to let her go. To him, Bisola, a royal blood, should never live outside the palace. Despite Yemi's desperate pleas, he forced her to leave without their daughter, and the queen departed, her heart shattered by the loss. However, under the reign of King Ajani, Cajola's prosperity withered. The rain ceased to fall, and crops died, leaving the people hungry and desperate. The once fertile lands turned dry and barren. Livestock perished, cattle mysteriously fell ill, and their cries filled the night, echoing through the village. The people began to ask questions. Every night, as he sat alone in his chambers, Ajani's past crept into his mind, vivid and relentless. The faces of those he had wronged haunted his dreams, women whose lives he had stolen, his own brother Deji, whom he had betrayed. Each vision was a reminder of the blood that stained his hands. Sleep became a rare gift, as his mind was tormented by these memories. His body began to betray him as well. One night, he woke to find that his right arm had gone numb, paralyzed entirely. It was as if his past sins had come to claim parts of his body, one by one. With every passing day, he felt weaker, more vulnerable. The villagers, seeing the kingdom's misfortunes, began to demand that he step down, whispering that the gods were angry with their king. But no one dared to confront King Ajani, for he ruled with an iron fist. Fear gripped Cajola, as the king's cruelty became known. Many feared that their lives may be cut short or that they might be jailed if they confronted the tyrant king. Even when villagers gathered to demand answers, he dismissed them with contempt. "These are mere misfortunes," he scoffed, refusing to acknowledge the people's pain. But the people's discontent simmered, and their patience began to wear thin. King Ajani became desperate and afraid, so he called upon Babalawo Oyetomi, his trusted priest, his face shadowed with worry and frustration. As Oyetomi entered the dimly lit chamber, he could sense the weight of the king's distress. "Baba Oyetomi," King Ajani began, his voice strained, "our kingdom suffers, and I can no longer ignore the cries of this people. The rains have not blessed our lands in 6 years. The rivers have long dried up, and we only survive on water and crops from neighboring villages. Our fields lie barren, and the people grow restless and fearful. They murmur that the gods have turned their backs on Cajola." He paused, pressing his trembling hand against his paralyzed arm, as though seeking comfort in the mere gesture. "Every night, I am haunted by whispers, accusing voices that follow me into sleep, and now I wake to find my own body betraying me. My arm is dead, unresponsive, and I fear it is only the beginning. The people have begun to doubt my strength, and they talk of demanding my removal." Desperation flickered in his eyes as he looked to Oyetomi, his last hope. "I have hidden the truth of my past from them. They do not know of the sins that haunt me, but I fear the gods do. I cannot let this curse overtake me, or I will lose all that I have fought for. Tell me, Baba, what must I do to lift this burden? How can I end this suffering before it consumes me, and my kingdom?" Oyetomi listened in silence, nodding slowly as he observed the king's growing fear. After a long pause, the priest leaned forward, his face calm but his voice solemn. Babalawo Oyetomi began to make some incantation, finding solutions to what the problem might be. "The gods are angry. There is a curse on this kingdom," Babalawo Oyetomi intoned, his voice directed to the king. "To lift this curse, the spirits call for a sacrifice that will quell their wrath and bring peace back to the kingdom." "What kind of sacrifice?" the king asked, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "A pure soul, of female royal blood," replied the priest, his gaze fixed on the king. Ajani's heart twisted with dread, understanding what was required. His only daughter, Princess Bisola, was the embodiment of innocence. Though he loved her, his fear of losing the throne was greater. "Will this end the kingdom's suffering?" he asked, his voice tight with fear. Babalawo Oyetomi nodded solemnly. The king hesitated, but his desire to rule outweighed his love for his daughter. "Very well," he murmured, his voice a whisper of defeat. That night, he summoned Princess Bisola to his chambers. He told her of the duty she must perform to save the kingdom. The king told the princess she was going to pray to the gods in a sacred forest and return home. She listened, her heart heavy with fear, but she was determined to help solve the village's problems. "I will do as you wish, Baba," she replied, her voice trembling. In the dead of night, the king led her to the sacred forest. Babalawo Oyatomi chanted incantations, calling upon the spirits. During this process, Bisola was rooted to the spot with a fixed gaze, and she completely went numb and unconscious after being affected by the priest's hypnotic incantations. She was buried alive, her spirit trapped beneath the earth. King Ajani returned to his palace, believing that peace would follow. But the suffering of Cajola only worsened, and the people grew angrier. Strange cries filled the air at night, chilling the villagers' bones. Visions of Princess Bisola's face haunted them, her eyes wide with horror. Apparently, the evil spirits and the cries of the innocent souls that tormented the village had altered the priest's judgment, leading him to offer the king the wrong solution, burying his daughter alive. That was never the solution that will lift the curse on the village, but it was rather another punishment on the king by the spirits. The king and the chief priest began to have heated arguments as the king questioned why things had not improved after the sacrifice was made. A palace guard overheard a conversation between the king and the priest. The guard listened, his heart pounding as the truth unfolded. He learned of Princess Bisola's tragic fate and the king's monstrous deed. Horrified, the guard shared the tale with the villagers. Outrage erupted as the people learned of their beloved princess's fate. "Our king is a murderer," they cried, demanding justice for Bisola. The elders gathered, their faces dark with anger and sorrow. They approached King Ajani, demanding that he say the truth. The king, cornered, he could not deny his guilt. With a heavy heart, the council declared that he must face judgment. Babalawo Oyatomi, too, was summoned, accused of deception and betrayal. The people called for both men to be cast out, banished from the kingdom. "You have brought shame and sorrow to Cajola," they declared. Ajani's face paled as he was stripped of his crown and title. The villagers gathered, watching as he and the priest were bound. They were led through the village, the people jeering and throwing stones. The once proud king walked in shame, his head bowed low. As he passed, he saw the faces of those he had wronged. Mothers who had lost daughters, families who had suffered his cruelty. His heart grew heavy with regret, but it was too late for forgiveness. The people watched, satisfied that justice had been served. The kingdom was cleansed of its corrupt king and his priest. Ajani and Oyatola were cast into exile, forbidden to return. As they wandered the wilderness, they were plagued by visions of the past. Ajani's mind fractured, haunted by the spirits of his victims. At night, he heard their voices, calling out for justice. He saw the faces of women he had wronged, their eyes filled with rage. Babalawo Oyatomi fared no better, his wisdom turned to madness. They were shadows of their former selves, broken by guilt and shame. Back in Cajola, peace slowly returned as the people rebuilt. They performed cleansing rituals at the palace, where they prayed for forgiveness and blessings. The rains returned after 6 years, nourishing the land and restoring life to the kingdom. The villagers spoke of all the evil things Ajani did, children were taught the tale, warned of the dangers of greed and cruelty. The elders told stories of the cursed king, a tale of betrayal and justice. The memory of Ajani's reign became a legend, a dark chapter in Cajola's history. In time, a new king was chosen, one who ruled with kindness and integrity. Under his guidance, Cajola flourished once more, a kingdom restored. And so, the cursed throne of Cajola became a tale of warning, a legacy of the price of sin and the power of truth. If you enjoy this story, please click the like button, drop comments, share with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, so you can be the first to know when there is a new video. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.